Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. I'm looking at a very heavy book, which we'll come on to in a moment. Heavy in a number of senses of the word, but light to read. This book is on immigration law. It's called the Immigration Law Handbook, and it's now in a 9th edition. It's been written by Margaret, Phelan and James Gillespie and published by the Oxford University Press. We've thought this book was very interesting as a statement of the law on what is a very emotive area and controversial at the moment. I'm recording this in the spring of 2015 during the general election campaign. The issue, of course, of immigration is a very high one on all the party agendas. Now, we think this book is very important because it's a statement of the law as we are at the moment in the early part of 2015. Elizabeth and I have talked about this book and we thought what sort of title to give it. So we've given it this title: For Immigration Practitioners, a single volume handbook containing all relevant materials for immigration and asylum law. And that's what it is. But it's a very big book. It's heavy. It's a paperback. There it is. That's the front. There's the side. And then there's the back. Now, what you have got is you've got some shaded areas, which are quite useful because you can find what you're looking for quite quickly if you know where to look and know the structure of the book. The book itself runs to just under 1900 odd pages. You've got a short index, which is right at the back, which I'll show you there. Then what you have got is, as I say, a whole series of shaded areas. For instance, the last little shaded box there, you can see the box, is on international matters. And then as we work our way through, you get into the various parts which the book is structured into. Now, the front of the book, again, there is the nice structure there. You've got the front page there. Then you've got the statutes, which it starts off with, which is again that shaded area there, and it's got all of the main pieces of legislation you need. Then you've got the procedural rules and practice directions. Then we go into statutory instruments as well. Then we get into international materials right at the back. Do read the preface, which is very important because that tells you why they've produced this particular edition for effectively the year 2014 to 15. There have been changes, and Margaret Phelan has mentioned them. Then you get into the statutes themselves. You can see all of the detail in the statutes itself. And then you go from there into part 2 on immigration rules. Again, very, very important areas. There are no footnotes in this because obviously they have brought together a huge amount of material as it's a handbook. There are also appendices to go with the immigration rules which are there. Then you've got immigration regulations as well. And finally, before you get to the international section, you've got the EU side of the activities. This is Commission regulations, Common Council directives and so forth, which you can see there. So it is a heavy book. Oxford University Press have certainly spent a bit of paper on this one. It's a very good book though, and one that I have seen around, I have to say, in the various courts and tribunals. It's one that it certainly should be available if you go to see advisors in the CAB or law centres. I would think some of them will have copies of these books because they are extremely helpful for the actual work that people do. Let me tell you a bit about the book anyway, because I think it's important to know what's available, because there are a number of books on the market at the moment. This one, of course, is a comprehensive guide, effectively, and handbook. What we say here is that Margaret Phelan and James Gillespie have produced what Mr. Justice Blake has described as a trusted and indispensable source of reference for materials on immigration and asylum law. It's been published by OUP, the Oxford University Press, and it's now in its new 9th edition of what is now a long established and highly regarded work, in one substantial volume of just under 2,000 pages, provision for all the main key materials required by the busy immigration law practitioner who needs to stay up to date with all recent developments. And these are of course quite considerable. As I indicated in my introductory remarks, the problem at the moment is a controversial area, and it could well be in for some substantial further revision and change in the coming years. There have been some 21 statements of change to the immigration rules since the last edition of this book came out, and the authors take you through these particular points. Certainly, as I've said, there have been substantial changes to existing legislation brought about by the Immigration Act 2014, which, as the authors also point out, introduces new restrictions on access to housing, as well as other facilities and services, and it's also wrought significant changes to the existing law affecting detention, enforcement, marriage, deprivation of citizenship, and more besides, of course. And I think it's important to note that the text of the Immigration Act 2014 is contained in this volume, together with the resulting changes to earlier existing legislation, notably the Immigration Act of 1971 and the Nationality, Immigration and Asylum Act of 2002. Also included are the immigration rules, which I also indicated earlier. Again, don't forget there's a shaded box area in the book, which means you can find them reasonably quickly. And these rules have been revised to incorporate changes which were announced in October 2014. They cover also new EU regulations, new procedure rules for the first tier tribunal, procedure rules for the upper tribunal, and changes to the EEA regulations. And as global considerations are now of prime importance in this area of law, it is most useful, we think, for practitioners that the handbook also contains, in addition to European materials and statutory instruments, a section of almost 300 pages now of international materials, in particular the UNHCR Handbook on Procedures and Criteria for Determining Refugee Status, which provides the most recent guidance on refugee claims. And this is a subject that won't go away, and therefore we've got to know exactly where we are at the moment prior to any possible further changes. The Convention on the Rights of the Child and other conventions on human rights, torture and stateless persons are included in this section, and I'm sure anybody involved in tribunal hearings will be aware of the importance and significance of that particular information, bearing in mind what you're going to be putting to the tribunal. Let me conclude by saying it's important to emphasise that one of the major strengths of this handbook is that it covers both recent new legislation and the existing legislation that preceded it. The result is a highly efficient and reliable reference tool for asylum and immigration tribunal judges, and of course barristers, solicitors and any advisors, other advisors, practicing in the areas of immigration, asylum and human rights law. No professional, in our view, involved in this sort of work on immigration issues should be without a copy of this authoritative work for conferences they may hold with a client or for court work itself. And the publication date is cited as at 2015. Let me just show you the book again very quickly. There it is, very heavy spine, and then the back, some quotes, and it does tell you the content. Opening it up in the middle, this is the immigration rules again. No footnotes at the bottom, but you don't have a particularly big index, by the way. There isn't a particularly large index at the back. There's enough to find things out. The international section is particularly relevant as well, which I like. There's the UNHCR detail there. And the front, again, statutes right at the beginning, Human Rights Act features, of course, very heavily. Anyway, thank you to both Margaret and James for producing a first-class book, and thank you to all concerned at OUP. It's an excellent edition and it makes our lives much easier as practitioners. Thank you. Bye-bye.